The 992 market takes its first hit after 1.5 years of price stability.
By how much did prices decline? What does this mean for the future, and are other generations affected?
Keep watching to find out the answers to these questions.
Let's not beat around the bush and dive into the latest 992 US price trends. At the end of the video we'll also look at a different country.
Over here we have the development in the 992 Carrera 2 base and S prices. In line with the general market, values decreased after the pandemic price top. But contrary to competitors, they stabilized during 2023 and remained fairly stable till May 2024. Now look what happened during the last 3 months. We can see that both base and S models experienced their biggest decline since February 2023. Prices decreased by 3.4% in the base market and by 3.6% in the S market, pushing the year-over-year decrease down to 4.4% and 7.1%.
Now there are two important things you need to know about this drop.
First, while these drops of 4.4% and 7.1% are relatively large compared to the price changes that we saw during the last 1.5 years, we will see later in the video that there's absolutely no reason to panic. There's still demand. Second, not all cars dropped by these rates. If we zoom into the S market, for example, and split the trend by model year, we can see that it are especially the 2024 and 2023 cars that are responsible for the increase in the average depreciation rate. These cars collected and are still collecting their first miles, meaning that they are at the steepest part of the depreciation curve. Older cars are still doing relatively well. Cars from 2020 lost, for example, 3.9%, less than the average drop of 7.1%. The same mechanics apply to the base model and, unsurprisingly, also to the GTS and T market. Over here we have the trend for the latter two models. This reveals that, including the most recent acceleration in depreciation, GTS's lost on average 11.1% and T's 9%, slightly more than the base and S models.
Now, as I said before, I don't think that owners should worry too much about this recent decline. Early 911s, like 2020 and 2021 models, didn't follow this traditional depreciation curve as they were released in abnormal market conditions. 2023 and 24 models though depreciate in line with the traditional curve, and this effect is starting to push on prices now.
So, is there an effect of this on other generations?
No, depreciation is basically non-existent in the rest of the Carrera market.
Continuing with the 9 and 1.2 base and S models, we can see that price decreases occurred for the last time during 2022. Since then, prices have been stable. Compared to last year, base models didn't change and S's lost 0.9%. Naturally, this latter drop isn't statistically confirmed, so it could be the result of chance. Looking at the GTS and T models, we can see that GTS's lost only 2.5%. Also in this market, prices are relatively stable. The T market though is at the moment too small to give a reliable estimate of the year-over-year change. You can see that the confidence interval is very large, highlighting a high price uncertainty. I would use the average of the base, S and GTS's for the T market, so minus 1.1%. Moving on to the 9 and 1.1, we can see that the .1 market is a bit smaller than the .2 market, so there's a bit more volatility and a marginally higher price uncertainty. Yet, overall, the trends are stable. S's are down by 1.3% or $1,100, and base models by 2.8% or $2,000. The S's have been hovering around roughly $80,000, and for the base models this is $70,000. These are strong prices. The same applies to the GTS, but similar to the .2 GTS market, we need to interpret this trend with care. .1 GTS's are becoming increasingly rare as supply is plummeting. Last year it fluctuated between 7 and 17 cars. But let's talk numbers. Last year prices decreased by 6.6% or $7,600.
Now, given what we saw in the 991 market, I think you know what we can expect in the 997 market.
More stability. Over here we have the trend for the .1 base and S models and .2 base, S and GTS models. Starting with the .1s, we can see that the base models are up by 0.1% and S models by 4.9%. Great results if you're an owner. These two numbers are also the most reliable ones for this graph. The .2 market is significantly smaller, increasing the uncertainty in the estimates. This goes especially for the base and GTSs. Nevertheless, looking at the trends, we can see that base models are down by 5.5%, SS up by 1%, and GTSs by 2.7%.
Also 996s are stable as ever.
Over here we have the trend for the .1 and .2 base models and .2 S models. The latter model of course only includes the 4Ss. I didn't add the drive wheel configuration split to the graph. Now we can see that there have been some small price fluctuations since 2022, but that little change in the grand scheme of things. .1 base models decreased by 1.1% or $300, and for .2s this is 2.4% or $800. S's are down by 9.1%, but to be fair, I wouldn't use this number due to the low number of cars for sale during August 2023. The price point isn't representative.
Now after that detailed dive into the 911 price trends, I think it's time to summarize and to put these numbers into a context.
Over here, I aggregated the results by generation and also included the results of the previous market updates, so the ones from February and May. The average depreciation rate moved from 1.9% in February to 0.5% in May and 1.7% in August, so on average the differences are only small. Changes in the smaller segments are then also mainly the result of randomness and chance. The change in the 992 market though sticks out. We can clearly see an increase in depreciation rate from -2 to -5.5%. Earlier in the video we saw that this is a result of 2023 and 2024 cars hitting the steepest parts of the depreciation curve.
I also shared with you that there's no reason to panic. Compared to other cars, a rate of 5.5% is still extremely low. Let me show you.
Over here we have the US year-over-year price changes for almost all cars that feature on my channel. On the horizontal axis we have the price change compared to last year in percentages, and on the vertical axis we have the number of cars to which this change applies. The average decrease during last year was 7.4%, and most cars lost between 11 and 1%. So this means that the 992 Carrera still lost less than the average. A good result, given the age of the car. Relatively new cars typically fall on the left-hand side of the average. Naturally, other generations are also still performing extremely well. No changes regarding the conclusion for the 991, 997 and 996.
Now, this decrease in the 992 market might be to some extent self-inflicted by the sellers. Demand has been strong indeed, but sellers refuse to offer discounts for unsold cars.
Over here we can see the development in the carried over inventory. That is, the percentage of cars that aren't sold within 3 months. Typically, when this value increases, cars are selling slower, something that puts downward pressure on prices. When it decreases, cars are selling quicker, typically leading to an increase in price strength. Looking at the trend per generation, we can see that cars sold slower when prices decreased after the pandemic price stop, but that the trends reversed in the beginning of 2022. During 2023, the trend was decreasing for all generations, indicating that cars were selling quicker and quicker. This matches with the flattening price trends. Now looking at the most recent developments, we can see that for the first time since the beginning of 2023, the trends increased marginally. Yet, overall, signaled that demand is still strong. Rates of 17% in the 992 market show that this is still one of the hottest markets of the moment, and indeed the most popular market of the 911 Carrera series.
So it's no surprise that sellers were quite confident about their pricing during the summer.
If we look at the price change for cars that aren't sold within 3 months, we can see a typical seasonal pattern. During the winter, unsold inventory is discounted more than during the summer, but during May of this year, the average discount for unsold 992s increased to 0%. Sellers figured that they can sell the car without reducing the price. The rate is even higher than in May 2023. Perhaps that was a bit too ambitious. We can see now that the rate decreased to -4%, a bit more than during August of last year. Again, this isn't a reason to panic, just a small sign that the market is perhaps a tad weaker than in August 2023.
Let's wrap up and conclude. We saw that the 992 market dipped. Yes, dipped. not crashed or collapsed.
The average depreciation rate increased from -2% to -5.5%. This is mainly driven by the 2023 and 2024 cars that started to accumulate miles. Also, the inventory levels revealed that the market strength is decreased slightly. Cars are a bit longer for sale and are discounted a tad more than last year.
But we shouldn't misinterpret these developments.
Despite a slight weakening in the 992 market, it's, in general, still depreciating less than the average rate, and that in absolute terms, cars are still selling extremely quickly.
The situation in the rest of the Carrera market didn't really change. Conclusions of the previous market update do then also still hold. These markets are exceptionally strong.
Of course, we only looked at descriptive data. This data has some predictive power for future short-term price developments, but cannot predict the long-term developments.
Let's see if the 992 rates will accelerate even further.
Now, before we wrap up, I have some bonus content. We only talked about the US market, but I also started to include the German markets in some videos. Of course, the most popular market on the channel, the 991, can't stay behind. Over here we have a comparison between the US and Germany. The German data is preliminary and needs to be interpreted with care. It's based on the change during the last 6 months and adjusted for the missing 6 months. We can see that the rates are similar to the ones in the US. That's unique and doesn't apply to all car markets. 992s in Germany dropped by 5.5% versus 5.6% in the US. For the 996 the rate is higher in Germany, but the uncertainty in the estimate is still high, so more data is needed here. The depreciation rate in the 991 market is again similar, 2.2 in Germany versus 2.4 in the US. In the 997 market, the difference is slightly larger, but again, these are just preliminary numbers.
Once I have enough data, I will include the German markets in the graphs as well. And with that we arrived at the end of the video. Now if you enjoy this data-driven way of analyzing car markets, but would like to see a video for a different car, head over to my channel. Over there you'll find detailed market updates for a large variety of cars. Can't find the car you're looking for? Let me know the name of the car by commenting it down below in the comment section. Once there are enough requests for a certain car, I'll make a video about it. As always, thank you for watching and I hope to see you in 2 weeks for a fresh market update.